physically as well. So that was a great moment. Thank you. I'll keep this brief because I think there's so much more that we want to concentrate on in terms of the future. I would like to say something just to make a bridge between where we've been and where we are. In suggesting what I'm going to say, I don't want in any way to suggest that the GRLI is losing any sincerity, any authenticity, or any community spirit. But in the years leading up to the pandemic, there have been times when I think we have felt, the GRLI has felt like a very comfortable travelling companion. So well-informed, well-connected, sincere. At times we have been massively provocative and providing for years a much-needed and timely wake-up call. But one that really, in terms of the context that we've been living in, it's been one for me that's been relatively easy to ignore. I have known it, but I have not felt it, and I have not lived it in the way that I think we currently have. So for me, those days have gone. In the interim between the inception and now, the GRLI, with all the people who've been on this call, the early innovators, the people who've been traveling together for some time, all of us have been working together to hone its message, the GRLI's ways of working, our connections, our alliances, and our networks. So we together have worked on creating a sound infrastructure, which is based on espoused and practiced values, and which, regardless of ever-changing landscapes, have remained pertinent to our times, and I would suggest will continue to remain pertinent to our times. Building on firm relational foundations, the partners of the GRLI have co-created effective, transparent, action-oriented projects. We have worked with connections, we've developed our governance structures, and we have guardians and board members past and present on this call. And everyone has served as a vigilant guardian of the integrity of the GRLI. In that sense, the work on the inside, whilst never complete, requires significantly less time and attention than I would suggest it has in the past. And I have to acknowledge that John, as our executive director, has worked tirelessly to ensure this is the case, tirelessly and successfully to ensure this is the case, as has Anders, accompanying us throughout the journey in his role as Secretary General. The time feels right now for the GRLI to take the inside out, to expand the reach, the breadth and the depth of our core message of being actively engaged with global responsibility in how we live, how we learn and how we lead, at the three levels of the individual, the I, the we and the all of us. If we are to be responsible in any way, shape or form, we have the responsibility to do more. We need to strengthen and grow our impact, not grow the GRLI for growth's sake, but strengthen the impact. And by our, I mean us. I mean those of us on this call, the wider partnership, our associates, both individual and organisational, for we are the GRLI. We're supported and held by the core team, ably supported in the amplification of our work by Claire Summer, and in our financial business by the finance team at EFMD. We're incredibly fortunate to be guided by the guardians, the board and its subcommittees, audit and governance, our advisors and our strategic partners, AACSB and EFMD, to all of you on the call who hold those roles in whatever shape or form you're connected to the GRLI, I send my heartfelt thanks to you. For those of you familiar with the way the GRLI works, you'll know that the partners are consulted at every opportunity, but especially when we have any recommendations or changes we need to make or are wanting to make to our engagement model moving forward. Now, in a moment, I'm going to hand over to John, who will share with you our thoughts about the next phase for the GRLI. But I would also like to end with a quote from Rebecca Solnit, who at the moment is, I am reading and holding close to my heart in her book, Hope in the Dark. She suggests that what we need to build is a contagion of boldness in terms of global responsibility. And we, the GRLI, we are suggesting we want to do it now. We must do it now, for when in the world has there ever been a more appropriate and relevant and critical time? John.
I'm on mute. Sorry. Thank you, Claire, for sharing your thoughts and reflection so eloquently as always, and also for sharing some words of hope, which are very much welcomed in these times. So I'm going to share some thoughts, as Claire suggested, some thoughts about how we travel together and our engagement model going forward. One of the reasons, of course, for doing this is that, you know, if we are to take any suggestions back to the board for validation, it needs to be something that's been discussed amongst the partners, and so we'll be putting forward just a few small proposals that we'll also invite people to comment on by the end of October, so that we know that we've allowed sufficient time for consultation and for input. I will share my screen just to have on hand some of my notes. So I think it goes without saying that that the fragile state of our global systems, whether it's environmental, social, economical, technological, for those of you that have watched The Social Dilemma recently, that our work of developing global responsibility is even more important than ever. We'd like to think that this context requires a variety of vehicles that can help navigate and transverse the terrain and the uncertain conditions that lie ahead. Even as it's reflected in our Towards 2030 work, it's not a strategic plan. It's a direction. It's an intent, because we recognize that the future is so incredibly uncertain. And so all we can do really is to forge the pathways that we think are relevant towards developing global responsibility. Now, if we think of vehicles, each of us will have our preferences of how we travel, and of what part we can play in making globally responsible progress real. It's already been said that there are parts of the world where, you know, the GLI and the work of GLI is underrepresented, and the time is here to grow our presence and our impact. Perhaps even a fleet of different vehicles is needed. But one thing is for certain, and that is that, as we just saw now, the GLI is very much on the move. In thinking through through this analogy or the metaphor of traveling together and of choosing vehicles that are, you know, both ethical and efficient, I came up with at least 2 examples, and this was also in conversation with the Guardians and the core team. Now, earlier last year, towards the end of last year, the Deans cohort met in Porto, and a number of the Deans took part in a sailing challenge. And of course, you know, with wind power, you have a very efficient way of traveling, provided that there's some wind, of course. But one of the analogies that I like in terms of vehicles for traveling is, of course, the bicycle. Because according to some studies, if you want to look at the number of joules spent per meter gained for a passenger, then cycling is more efficient than walking. Now, I realize that cycling is not for everyone. So please see this as a metaphor or an analogy. But I thought it's one that may serve us well. The GRI is purpose-led. We've actively resisted institutionalization to the extent that we can, really in favor of doing the work of developing global responsibility and making globally responsible progress real. So as an experimental entity, we've thought of the GLI as the spider in the web that senses, connects, and catalyzes we've described it as an ongoing collaborative inquiry. But we are ultimately about making globally responsible progress real. And so how do we ensure that we travel both ethically and efficiently? A few years ago, when we were still publishing the magazine, we of course since moved to the blog, we had a cover on our magazine where Anna was photographed in Cape Town with a bicycle. So it's an analogy that we've used before, but I think it works quite nicely on a number of levels when we talk about the GLI and global responsibility as needing work and transforming at multiple levels, me, we, all of us. Then you could at the individual level say that it's about a personal commitment to ethically efficient practice and leadership. I think of the song by Queen, I Want to Ride My Bicycle. But if you look at a collective level, perhaps it's about getting out of our single occupancy cars and joining the peloton or the social outride or the cycling commuter mass. There's been some lovely videos recently of how many people are starting to commute by bike. I know that it's been quite contentious in some parts of the world as they're building more bike lanes. But when we, in our cycling groups here in George, we talk about calling a ride. So at the we level, let's urge ourselves to call a ride, not a cab. And then at the all of us level, and this was a suggestion from Chris Laszlo, who joined us on the previous call, let's design flourishing cities, of which one feature is that there are more bike lanes. So in other words, create the momentum and conditions for transforming systems, which of course requires globally responsible progress at both the me and the we level. So, but there are different ways of looking at it as well. And maybe just before I go there, Carlo Giardanetti, one of our guardians, mentioned. We'll tell the story about the year 1816, which was apparently the year without the summer in Europe due to a volcanic eruption, which led to a shortage of oats to feed horses with. And that climatic event led one inventor in Germany, I think, to build the velocipede, which of course was the predecessor to the bicycle. So perhaps there's a little lesson from history of finding yourselves in really uncertain times and inventing something that inventing a mode of transport that is fit for purpose and that meets the conditions and the needs of the world around us. I know there's also on the WhatsApp group, there's some discussion about what part of the bicycle might we use it as an analogy. And so that's an interesting one to get into. But I do want to acknowledge that, if we were to take this type of lens of, the mode of travel of the GLI, and we, for instance, took the example of a bicycle, that we recognize that there are different modes of cycling. There are different disciplines. There are different reasons why people cycle. There are different types of bicycles. And there are people who are not allowed to get on a bicycle, or they either cannot afford it, or they are simply culturally not allowed to. And I saw a lovely article recently by the Wellbeing Economy Alliance, which is another group that we're working with as well, where someone suggested, what if we replace the notion of GDP as a measure of progress with girls on bikes? Because if there are more girls on bicycles, it means that more girls are getting educated. It means that the streets are safer. It means that there are less cars on the road, etc., etc. So again, it's an analogy, it's a metaphor, but it's a way or a lens of looking at the GLI as a vehicle and our work as gaining or gathering momentum in different ways. I've already alluded to this. We could perhaps look at a bicycle and try and think about what part do we play, either individually, organizationally, or collectively. And the discussion on the WhatsApp group was with reference to an example that Anna Karanen brought after doing an interview where one of the leaders that she spoke to said that they see leadership as being the hub of the wheel because it holds the spokes and the tension. And then I think Kathleen Curran on the group said, perhaps it's the rim, because that's where the rubber meets the road, and it brings different perspectives together. So I think it's just to give us a different way of thinking and imagining how we travel together in doing the work of developing global responsibility. And we can certainly come back to this, but I wanted to introduce the metaphor or the analogy in case it helps spark some further conversation. Just briefly, who are we though? Because some of us may need to be reminded. We have strategic and founding partners. Our strategic partners, of course, AAC's, BNEF, and D are very much also supporting us in terms of financial contributions. We have 21 full partners out of a possible 25. Okay, so many of you on the call today are representing one of these institutions, and some of these were also on the call earlier this week. So these are the 21 institutions that are full institutional partners. We also have associate partners, and we have some project partners, which I don't have the logos on here, but Emerald, for instance, has been a publishing partner for a number of years now. Our associate partners, more recently introduced, are do not hold governance and direction setting responsibilities in relation to the GLI, but are very much helping advocate and develop our work. And we have a growing group of independent associates, and we have some of those joining us on the call today as well. So we had Nicola earlier, and we've got Carol, and earlier this week we had Otti and Kathleen and others, and Miriam as well. But how this enables us, and I think it's important for us just at an AGM also to say something about this, how this enables us is that through our strategic partners, our full partners, our associate partners, and the individual associates, we gather the resources with which to do our work, and arguably we're quite lean. But the work that lies ahead is definitely not getting any less. So what we'd like to do is we'd like to look at ways of ensuring that the GLI can not only sustain what it's doing right now, but perhaps also grow its influence and its impact without necessarily becoming a big organization, because I think that's something that we've historically and also more recently been quite clear on resisting is not to become a big entity, but rather to act as a catalyst. So what we're looking at in terms of emboldening our engagement model is of course to become more representative, both within the GLI and beyond the GLI in our work, in both the approach and the impact, and that requires more distributed working and enablement, that not only in our governance structures, but also in our operations. And so we'd like to strive to have a complete and engaged partnership of the full 25 institutions, whilst recruiting into associate partner level a future pipeline of full institutional partners, of institutions that could in the future also become full institutional partners. By creating additional capacity at the core, we can better enable our governance structures, but also the partnership network itself, to act more visibly and proactively on the GLI's behalf, so that we're not only looking at the very small core team, but perhaps having a more distributed support around the globe for our partners and all their activities. And concretely, this led us to a number of specific actions or points that we're proposing that affects our engagement model. Ultimately, we'd like to have stronger connections amongst all the participants in the network. And so one of the things that we'd like to kick off is to have guardian held or supported pods where 4 to 5 institutions can meet or check in more regularly to ensure deeper engagement with the GLI's work. This is not to say that if you're in a pod with 3 or 4 other institutions that you only link up to them or work with them, but that you know that there's a steady rhythm of checking and a connection amongst partner groups, and it may be that it's regional or it may be topical. It's certainly going to be fluid. We'll work with the Guardian group and of course the partners to figure out how to best configure these pods. But yeah, so but I'll ask 1 or 2 of the Guardians maybe just to say something about this shortly. So let me just work through all these points and then we'll get to them. We'd also like to ensure that we have a full partner complement. There are currently 4 spaces open. We're going to be looking to the deans and directors cohort and beyond for recruiting at least 8 new associate partners next year. And then we'd like to work with EFMD and AACSB to involve an additional complementary strategic partner, which may be an entity that is not specifically focused on business and management education, but that is complementary to our work and that may bring access to more business or civil society participants in our work. We're also proposing a roundup of the contributions at partner and associate partner level. Maybe just some context here. Historically, partners contributed 5,000 euros per annum. About 4 or 5 years ago, I think we started discounting those that have been contributing for more than 4 years to contribute 3,800. We're now at a point where nearly everyone is contributing 3,800 per annum. And so we thought we don't want to necessarily put up fees by much, but if we were to round it up across the 21 current partners, then it gives us some additional capacity financially. So it's that small rounding up of both partner and associate partner contributions that we're proposing. And then a lot of this, if we were able to recruit 8 new associate partners, have a full partner complement, and round up the partner contributions starting next year, we can start looking for part-time regional associate directors, and that's just an interim term that we're proposing. That we may end up calling it something else, but ultimately what it could be is a peer-based group around the center that advocates on behalf of the GLI and helps grow our participation and activities across space and time. In very simple terms, I think about it as taking my role where I'm basically looking at governance, finance, operations, amplification with the support from Claire Summer, network initiatives, alliances, etc., and starting to spread that around a group of regional associate directors, which perhaps if I'm still relevant and capable, then perhaps I can form part of on the longer run. Along with these actions, we'd also like to encourage more of our partners and associate partners to start participating in the Deans and Directors cohort. So we'll continue to charge non-partners for participation and offer a significant discount for our partners and associates for those meetings of the Deans and Directors cohort that incurs a fee. So these are the proposed actions in a nutshell, and it's quite a mouthful, but hopefully you've been able to follow that. And I'm going to, I'll put the screen back on in a second if need be, but I see that there are lots of comments. Maybe whilst I read through the chat, oh, someone asked if was the screen too small? Sorry.
No, it's fine, John. It was me, and don't worry. Don't worry.
So I'd love to hear if there's any thoughts or comments.
May I just add something whilst people are thinking, John? Would that be okay?
Mm-hmm.
It's just, as you were talking, I was thinking also about our governance structures. And one of the things that we have been working with, and that one of the questions that I bring into these meetings is about diversity and representation. And I know that one of the things that's exercised the board and the Guardians recently has been that we are definitely representative, but we are not as diverse as we would wish to be. And that there are voices that we're not hearing. And so one of the advantages that we thought could be of having representation in different geographical locations is that our representation grows, and therefore we can become more diverse in our structures and governance structures and so on. So there's a kind of subtext, well, a quite loud subtext to their wanting to diversify as well.
That with diversification raises the opportunity for the impact as well. And the experiences from the early days when we were pretty much global, pretty much on all 5 continents. The learning was immense. It really, really added to the richness of the whole community.
It seems to me, Pierre speaking, it seems to me there is a form of paradox. On one side, the issue of global responsibility with all the both the political situation and the climate situation are more and more mainstream today. So it's not as new as it was 15 years ago. But on the other side, many more people are definitively extremely concerned by that. And I think we have a gold mine within GRLI in terms of experience, in terms of good practices, etc., which is there to be shared and spread out. So I see a form of paradox of, on one side, maybe because global responsibility today is and sustainability is mainstream, we will have just nothing to say. So the setup clause should be put in force, and we should close the house. But on the other side, and this is a decision which has been wisely taken by expanding from 2024 to 2030, the perspective, we have many things to still share and lead. And if we are in that move, I have a little concern with the ceiling to 25 full participants. I'm afraid it could be counterproductive to really consider that going to 21 to 25 will be fine, but not willing to spread out the word and the participant up to the double without taking immense ambitions. I see a kind of contradiction there.
If I may just quickly respond to that, Pierre, not that I think I have a perfect answer for that, but so partly the 25 is about having a group that is engaged and that more or less knows each other, and that provides some sort of steadiness and safety in terms of direction setting, in terms of stewardship. The associate partner level is the area where I think, and perhaps we need to think about how we position it, but is the growth segment, if you will. And if we have 25 fully engaged partners, and we only have 21 at the moment, so so setting it at 50. If we suddenly were to set it at 50 and we have 21, it kind of it kind of creates that impression that we're not meeting what we're setting up for. But I don't know. I think there seems to be interest in the associate partner level. We haven't explicitly put a cap on that. So perhaps we just need to think about how we position the full partners vis-a-vis the associate partners, so that we still have a really engaged stewardship group in the Council of Partners of 25, but that we continue to grow in impact and reach through the associate partners. Those are my thoughts on it, but I take your point. I mean, there is a bit of a paradox in, but in many ways that is the GLI. We are a paradox because, yeah.
But adding to that, John, the main reason was to really get a group that is engaged, that is fully on board and able to drive the development. And as soon as there is a really push for more organizations and opportunity to join in on that, and not too big, but large enough to be able to handle in the way we're handling it now. So it can't be, too many. That will be considered.
I understand, but not trying to bargain or whatever. My point is that if we really want to be open towards more voices from business or more voices from other institutions than business school, strategically speaking, it will make sense to have an equilibrium of the 20 or 21 present partners, plus 10 from business, plus 10 from other type of academic institutions. I mean, any organization cannot think about the future without a kind of vision or strategic intention. And if the strategic intention as for today is, okay, let's keep the table small enough that we are between us, because if there are too many guys, it could be disruptive. I am wondering whether we want really to incorporate the voices of other type of academic institution and of business. This was my perception of a potential contradiction. So sorry to readdress the point.
John, may I jump on Pierre's comment? Just one idea. I think lots of things are really changing now. And I was thinking about the sentence, first they ignore you, then they love of you, and then they fight you. And I think something which happened in the business world, I don't know if you have the same feeling in your country. We were, except few small inspired leaders, we were really outside of the business, trying to push into the business. There are lots of movement right now of business leaders who actually are doing really, really well. I'm not saying about signing Global Compact. Huh? This is great, but this is really weak, But people who are really convinced. In France, there are really networks of business leaders, and we work with different, some of them. And probably some of the partners that we should have around with us are not one specific organization or company, but networks. Those people who actually are leading, I think about entrepreneur d'avenir in French, entrepreneur for future, all the, or social entrepreneur movement. So probably it could be interesting to find in all over the world, people who actually are not speaking for their own company, but as a representative of a movement, a business movement in the local, in the community. Just an idea. Because we were for a long time the happy clappy people, not serious. And it's why I was thinking about this sentence. They stop laughing. Lots of people actually are convinced, but lots of people are really, really fighting to protect, because they realize that what we try to say can have a huge impact of their own business. And actually it's because we are more serious, because more people are speaking about climate change, about poverty, about all those SDG. I think and you can see what's happened in the US. You know, it's really the war. They are really fighting. So I think we should try to find some allies in the business world, but not one specific company, but more networks of those movement.
Right.
Another, maybe it's the wrong thing, but we have been we're purpose driven, and impact has been key, and not numbers. So the numbers on the inside hasn't really been the key. What's been driving us is the wider impact. But of course, there is a reason to always think about who's going to be engaged on the inside to raise that impact as well. But that's another way of looking upon it. That the number of organizations that are working with driving the intent of GRI is not is not a goal in itself. It's just a mean for larger impact. Did that make sense?
It does, Anders. I think also
it does. Go ahead, Claire.
This is not in a response to JCM here. I think the questions are really good and the points are really well made.
Absolutely.
And they're and we've got them. We're recording it, so worthy of further dialogue, without doubt. I think one of the other elements that we thought about with seeking what we've called regional associate directors is that we could possibly align their part-time role with the GRI potentially with them being located in a foundation or a movement or a business that was in some way, again, aligned with the values and principles of the GRI. So that could be another way in which we reach out to different entities. Very embryonic, but we had thought about that. That's also part of the dialogue. Thank you, John.
Yes, and I think maybe just to add to that, just as the last one, I think it's about being in a position to connect those voices and participants that are perhaps not immediately partnered with the GLI, but that we recognize needs to be heard and or needs to be worked with. So, again, I'm coming back to the example of the Deans and Directors Code. We have that platform. How do we leverage that work to bring in the voices and the participation of senior leaders in business so that we can bridge that academic business divide that still exists? Similarly through our partnership, if we have a steady core and engaged partnership that holds the GLI, how do we then bring into associate partner or perhaps at strategic partner level entities that are representative of the wider landscape that we want to influence and work with? JC,
yeah.
And sorry, because we discussed that idea startup and probably stupid. OICOS, the student organization, they have a development quite different of other student organizations. Lots of what we have at KH, for instance, we have international movement who try to create a specific student association in our school. Okay, so they start from scratch, then that's it. Some other organizations, and I think OICOS is the case, sometimes arrive in a place where actually there are already people who are doing the same type of job. And they're just giving a kind of stamp, a kind of label, okay? And with that, so it doesn't cost a lot because the people are already doing the job, they are already doing great things. But they help them for two things. They help them to rationalize some stuff, for sure, and to raise the voice, the local voice, at an international level. And I do think that one of the richness that we probably don't use enough, it's, again, just an idea, it could definitely be totally stupid. But one thing could be to have, coming back to my previous idea of working with local movement of entrepreneurs, for instance, we could have a kind of labelization. This is not the right word, okay? But asking them to hold what we are doing. They have staff, they are doing things, they are, and we just check that we are in a line with some values, if they agree on something, blah, 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 blah. And then they receive a kind of recognition. So it's just few throwing seeds and probably stupid ideas, but it could be something that we can use. It's actually helping national movement, first of all, sometimes to discuss together, because they are focusing on ground and nothing, so it's quite difficult to share ideas abroad. And I think we can bring that. So I don't know the business model behind that, but it could be an idea also.
Yeah,
I don't know.
It makes sense, because it's ultimately what that is activating the global responsibility gene where it is present, and sequencing and recognizing that it exists. Yeah.
But there are lots of people who are doing great things, you know, and we can just probably challenge what they are doing. We can help them. We can, and it's easy to spread worldwide.
Great, thanks. And I see Anna says good idea. So we are keeping we're holding space until the end of October for further comments and suggestions on what we're proposing. This, you know, the specific actions around partner pods, around growing the associate partner category, around targeting a full partner complement, rounding up the contributions with a small amount, and then moving to seeking some part-time regional associate directors capacity. If you have comments and questions on those, any further comments and questions on those, we are presenting it to board for validation on the 18th of November. So ideally, if we could have your comments by the end of October, that would be great. And you're welcome to send it to me by email, or to Claire and Anders, or Claire Summer as well. I have, I'm just doing a quick time check here, and there's unless there's any other urgent kind of remarks or suggestions regarding what we've discussed here, I'd like to see if we're ready to move on to an update on our governance. Are we ready? Is Vanessa still on the call? Yes.
I'm ready if everyone else is.
Yeah, absolutely.
The children have just gone to school, so this is really good timing, because there was an awful lot of noise happening for the last hour at breakfast time. So I just wanted to share a little bit about what we've been doing with the Guardians over the last 6 months, and 2 key initiatives that we're progressing into 2021. So it's been a really different 6 months for us all, hasn't it? And this year as Guardians, we planned to hold regular inquiry spaces together, ensuring we're able to play our role in the GRLI in shaping the pathways towards 2030, holding ourselves to account and others to place the GRLI's values at the heart of everything we do. Then COVID happened. And whilst we recognised very early into the pandemic that some of our bigger questions would require more attention than ever, we also recognised how difficult a time it was to think beyond the weeks ahead. So we accepted that it might not always be possible for us to think big, and sometimes we just needed to be there for each other, to listen, recharge, and to learn together about what was happening in the here and now. And I've really appreciated this, particularly the kindness, the connection, and the passion for inquiry on the bigger questions, acknowledging that each of us has been there for us personally, and it's not always been easy with COVID in our lives. So it's this experience that's enabled us to look towards 2021 and the future that we want to shape within the Guardians. And we've acknowledged that as a small group, we need more support to create greater impact. And this has led to 2 key decisions. So we've invited applications for new Guardians elect to strengthen our reach and to catalyse our thinking and shape our engagement model with others. That's my husband in the background. He's helpfully putting the shopping away. Steve, you might just need to stop moving the shopping bags just for one moment. Thank you, everyone. And we're really delighted to welcome Florencia, Simon, Anna, Adrian and Nicola as Guardians-elect. And we look forward to beginning the journey with them with some Guardian connection time coming up at the end of the month. So for a time, our current Guardians aren't moving on, and we have new Guardians moving into position, so we're strengthening our numbers, which will enable us to really look at the design of the things that John shared, like partner pods, and that's been our other consideration. So it's strengthening our engagement model, clarifying the Guardian's role to enable this, and how we can gather insights and harness connections. Arnold used the gather and scatter analogy, and it's been really important in the design of the thinking that we've shaped in the last year. So we're also looking at how we collaborate and bring insight from a new generation of leaders with some work that Chris Taylor is doing. And also we're hoping to bring more of the voice of our past Guardians into our future work. So some of you on the call, we really want to find a way of reconnecting on a more regular basis with the experience and knowledge of previous years of guardianship. So we're really all excited about the possibilities this brings for us individually and as a Guardian group, and for all of us across our network. And once again, I'd like to say a huge thank you to our new Guardians-elect, and a huge continued thanks to current Guardians, so JC, Anna, Chris, Carlo and Romina, who continue to support and enable us to shape where we are today, and particularly have helped me in the last 6 months by just being there as a group that really care about each other. We want to share more about who we are in our blog, so I started a video campaign last week within the Guardians. We hope to share more of ourselves, so some more whole person biography work, so that you can all get to know us a little better too. And if at any point you'd like to connect with us to hear more about our role, please don't hesitate to get in touch with any of us. And John shared the pictures of us on the screen. I hope my shopping's now in the fridge, so hopefully you could hear that. Yeah, managing home working is a challenge every day, but thank you, John.
Thank you, Vanessa, and also from my side, congratulations to the new Guardians, and of course my warm thanks to the current Guardian group, and Vanessa, also to you for all the work you do in leading and holding the Guardians. It's absolutely critical, and it's really at the core of what helps make the GLI work and do its work. You would have noticed that we've always had it in the statutes that we can have by-invite Guardians. So Anna from Ishte and Adrian from ESSEC are joining as partner Guardians, or partner representative Guardians. And then in the by-invite category, we have Florencia from STSN or STG Academy, Simon Ray, who heads up learning and development at EcoBank, and then also Nicola Place, who's been working with us actually for a number of years already on a number of academic pursuits around responsible leadership. So thank you very much for that. I know that there's also some other updates around governance. I think one of them, just to mention, is that we're in conversation with Oikos about resetting our ambassadors group, but in a slightly different format. And on the call earlier this week, we had the incoming president of Oikos, Sophie Charoy. She joined us for the call. We are looking at initiating a cohort of student leaders that involves not only Oikos, but possibly also other networks, Enactus, Net Impact, SOS, and so forth. And so what we like to do there is experiment with a whole person learning program for the now generation. That would be a slightly different version of the ambassadors program than what we had before, and that may eventually act as a type of soundboard to our partnership and our board and our Guardians, and may even become something standalone, and hopefully even bigger than the GLI itself. So we're working on a concept there, working closely with Oikos on that, and also receiving some support from the Oasis Foundation, and specifically some time commitments from Chris Taylor. So I want to recognize that and share. And then maybe just turning to Claire Maxwell, if there's anything from the board side that you just wanted to highlight in terms of governance.
No, I don't think so. Thank you, John. I think you've covered it really well. The only thing that I'm taking away from these two meetings is that unless there are any objections, serious objections that arise following deeper dialogue between now and the next time the board meets, and I'm looking to our board members on the call, Mary and Vanessa, it feels like we have a mandate to keep moving forward, taking it into the board for validation and further discussion, and the board obviously have their final decision-making mandate. But I think it feels like we have a growing momentum for moving in the direction of travel we're suggesting. Thank you.
Dear Claire,
yes.
may I ask a question related to our present state of relation with UN Global Compact?
You can with pleasure. So good point, Pierre. So for those of you who don't know, the UNGC have a seat on our board, which was previously occupied by a PRME representative, so Jonas Hertel. Since that space on the board is still there. We have been in regular contact with the UNGC to say that we are looking and seeking for representative to join us on the board and we're looking for someone at a senior level who is able to make decisions there and then at board level. We were in discussions with Lisa Kingo, and then of course Lisa has since left the UNGC Global Compact. And remind me, is it Sandra, John?
Sanja Ojiambo.
Thank you. Has recently taken over as executive director, and we have written to Sandra explaining exactly the same thing, sending our terms of reference for the board place, and we're waiting to receive a nomination and also to engage in wider dialogue around what that actually means in practice and what that means for our board here. So it's work in progress, I think, is the best way to describe it. Does that help?
Yes, absolutely. I have observed with interest some instability at the level of UNGC head.
Yeah.
But beyond that, what is the present status of the action of Prime and Prime Secretariat?
In terms of the board, Pierre?
Yeah, or in terms of interaction with what we are doing in GRLI.
Right. John, do you want to respond to that, or?
So we don't hold any role in the governance of Prime at this stage, but a number of our partners, associates, and independent associates are very active, and we're very glad that they are continuing to drive the implementation of the principles. We have on the call here Carol Parks. Carol's playing a key role in the UK chapter, in some of the working groups. Carol, I don't know if there's anything that you'd like to share just in terms of your observations and interactions.
Well, as many of you know, John and I, representing the former steering committee groups and advisory committee groups, I was lastly the acting chair. Those were effectively dissolved and a new Prime board was implemented. That was not democratically elected, and it is diverse, but it is not representative of the various community groups within Prime, and that has been stated very clearly to Prime. So they're not currently looking to, as I understand it, provide links for organisations other than those that already exist. But the work of the working groups on the various subjects like poverty and climate and various other things is very strong, and the work of the chapters is very strong, with very good membership and involvement in a number of levels. So in terms of the community, and Prime, essentially, as many of you who've been involved will know, has essentially been a community-based organisation. But it doesn't feel at the moment that the leadership is in a situation where it's representing the membership. But that's an observation I have.
Thank you, Carol.
Thank you, Carol.
Sorry, John, I wonder if it's, you may be already going to do this, so forgive me for interfering if you are. It's just that our connection with ABIS and again, that link with business and industry and co-op.
Well, yes. So with ABIS, and we touched on this earlier, the alliance there. I know Claire actually met with the president of ABIS earlier this week. So there's both at governance and operational level, there's continued conversation and dialogue. But we're working closely with ABIS on formulating the concept of the family and privately owned business cohort, which we'd like to kickstart in December. And so we'll be extending that invite not only to partners and some of the networks that we have contact with, but ABIS will be doing the same at their end. So it's an opportunity for GLI and ABIS in an aligned fashion to co-initiate the cohort for family and privately owned business. So that's very much still alive and progressing. And then maybe just for completeness' sake, there will be new AACSB representation on our board. It did go out on the newsletter as well, but Karen Beck-Dudley, who's the new president and CEO at AACSB, we've already had one meeting with Karen. We're meeting with her again ahead of the next board meeting, and she's been very positive about the AACSB's strategic partnership with GLI. Carol?
Yeah, just while you're talking about partnerships and you mentioned students, I have very close and strong working relationships with SOS on the Students Organising Sustainability, and they do some tremendous work. So if you wanted a connection or some indication of that, just reach out. Okay.
Thank you. Thanks, Carol. And that's going to be particularly relevant as we start the Now Generation cohort with Oikos. SOS as a concept, I think, was something that was first discussed in New York, actually. And I know Jamie Agomba and Charlotte Bonner and a few others have been very active in helping set that up. So we'll definitely I'll be in touch with you definitely about ensuring that we stay fully aligned and involved in. Okay, so as we move to close, there's an opportunity. If there's any other business that needs to be placed on the agenda, there may not be much time left to discuss, but I just want to make sure that we do ensure that if there's anything else that needs to be added to the agenda for consideration going forward, that you have an opportunity to do so. Okay.
John, if I may,
Arnold?
Maybe this is just a brief heads up that we are talking about a conference in Stellenbosch again next year at the end of November, which might not be a repeat of the wonderful gathering that we had in 2012, because there are so many uncertainties around us in the world at the moment. But we're working with GRLI from USB's perspective, then Stellenbosch Business School, but we're also incorporating two other institutions, namely the Alan Gray Center for Values-Based Leadership at Cape Town Business School, and then also the Albert Luthuli Institute for Leadership at the University of Pretoria. So it's germinating at the moment. There's not much to share, but the working title that we are considering at the moment is responsible leadership reimagined. It's an effort towards incorporating thinking about where are we at the moment, what is it that we are learning about responsible leadership in the time in which you are at the moment specifically. But it's also, and that's something that I picked up in this conversation today, also specifically in one of the breakout rooms, is that there will be a strong push towards the question about impact. Not just theorizing, but impact. And maybe just also to connect with some elements of the conversation here, not just scholarly, but also practitioner, as well as thought leadership contributions, and specifically from a thought leadership perspective, also coming from the world of politics, the world of business, the world of NGOs, and so on. There's another element that we are talking about. Once again, it's in a germinating stage, but we are not from an exclusively African perspective, but strongly thinking about the African voice in the responsible leadership agenda, in framing it as well. So from that perspective, it's not limited to Africans talking, but it's an invitation to the global community around this topic to also start thinking about what do we do with the global south? What do we do in terms of this theme with respect to a continent such as Africa? The call for papers will go out because of the fact that it's also an academic conference combined with all the other perspectives, but the call will go out hopefully before the end of the year. So we are currently working on that. John is very much part and parcel of our steering committee, like it was the case in 2012. So watch out for an invitation. It will come to you in due time.
Thanks, Arnold. And then there was a contribution also from JC and from Anna, I think.
Yes, a really quick thing which could interest also you. There are lots of initiative now on things that we have pushed for years about changing accreditation and ranking. And of course, in those great movement, there are also lots of really big shit. And really, it's really crap. And people are doing new ranking without any idea of what they're doing. It's really, I think, one of the problems. So there are of course, there is the positive impact rating things that Katrina have launched, really interesting. But at the UN level, and I think, John, you have been invited also to that, the next working group. We have launched last year a group with ASI, with Higher Education Sustainability Initiative, to try to help assessment people to do the best if they want to do something. So we produce some materials, and one thing, I don't know what GLI can do, but I know that this group is looking for goodwill to lead something, and probably we could do something with a GLI I think. I don't know, John, if you want to add something, but
Yeah, no, I think maybe just to add to that, I think that the best there probably is if we have a very short summary, JC, of what exactly the opportunity is for people to get engaged. And I mean, we've already done this with some of those streams in HESI where Julia and others have participated in driving the work. So
okay, I'll do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Anna?
Just commenting positively on what Arnold said. Yes, really looking forward of that, and it's really nice to hear that it's also a research conference.
Okay. Anyone else? I see, Michaela, your video's back on, and was wondering whether you were about to say something.
Sorry, no, I've had to cook dinner for my daughter. So
Of course.
I was listening, but I just thought I didn't need everyone to see me cooking.
We might learn something, Michaela.
Yeah.
No, trust me, you won't be.
So I think that brings us more or less to a close, and all that remains is, oh no,
Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry, very, very quickly, I just want to say a huge thank you to you, John, for holding the meeting in the way that you have, for everything that you do on our behalf.
Thank you.
Thank you so very much.
Can I just say something briefly, John?
Richard, yes.
Very briefly. Just in terms of, you know, the publishing side of things, you know, I'm sort of picking up on, you know, all the things about strengthening impact, you know, co-creation, interdisciplinary, all the real impact, you know, are all, you know, completely aligned with what we're trying to achieve. And you're talking about vehicles for change. And I think we need to think beyond just, you know, the old sort of models of disseminating what we're thinking about in publishing a special issue in a journal or whatever. And that's the discussion that I would like us to keep having, which we're already having about open research, which actually engages not just an academic readership, which is vital, right? But also alternative types of content, so that we're not necessarily thinking about articles to get the message across. They're all ringing the right bells with me, is all I'm saying, in terms of engagement, and that's the discussion I'd like us to keep having in order to achieve this greater dissemination, greater impact.
That could be a thought for the Stellenbosch meeting as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
For the call.
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah. Thank you, Richard. So I'm going to, as we close, I'm just going to leave you with a small gift of a poem that I saw recently by Wendell Berry, and then I'll close the call. The reason this kind of piqued my interest is when we met earlier this year, we spoke about the GLI as kind of being the spider in the web. And so this poem has a lovely image of the spider's wheel which catches the light. And so I thought, you know, given current circumstances and what we're trying to do, this may be something of interest. So I'm just going to share this with you. Awakened from the persistent dream of human chaos, come again. I walk in the lamed woods, the light brought down by felling of great trees, and in the rising thicket, where the shadow of old grace returns. Leaf shadows tremble on light leaves, a lighter foliage of song. Among them, the wind's thousand tongues and songs of birds, beams reaching down into the shadows swirl and swarm, with gleaming traffic of the air, bright grains of generative dust and winged intelligences. Among high maple leaves, a spider's wheel shines, work of finest making made touchingly in the dark. The dark again has prayed the light to come down into it, to animate and move it in its heaviness. So what was still and dark wakes up, becomes intelligent, moves, names, itself by hunger and by kind, walks, swims, flies, cries, calls, speaks, or sings. We all are praying to the light we are but cannot know. Thank you very much, everyone. Much appreciate your time and effort, and look forward to continued connection.
Thank you so much. Goodbye, everyone.
Thanks.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Thank you,
Have a
everyone.
good day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Well done.
Here we are.
Well done.
Well done.
Well done.
Good.
Done. Yeah.
We got the rest of the day off.